Hey, Gene.
Hey Josh,
How are you doing today?
same old, same old. We switched my son to a daycare that now he gets off school at 3. So now I can no longer, I've lost 2 hours every day because I have to pick him up early and keep him occupied for starting at 3 instead of at 5:30.
Got it. Hello, Judith. Well, let's see, you're on mute.
Hi, Josh. How are you?
Good. Welcome.
We thank you. We've been connected on LinkedIn for a long time. We communicated a little bit a few years ago, and then I think the pandemic hit and everything went away.
Yeah. Pandemic
So
interrupted a lot of things.
it did. It did. And I can appreciate what it was like to have small children. Mine are grown up. They do grow up. So
Yeah.
something to look forward to, but enjoy them while they're small.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to reconnect here. So welcome, and we'll probably have some other people joining as the hour goes on. People can jump in and jump out of these calls anytime they want. So,
And I just noticed that you stay on for about 2 hours, which is significant.
so I stay on for 2 hours. The way that we do it is we do Q&A. And
Okay.
when everybody's questions are answered, then we go into just a working session. And again, this is all, if you want to stick around, you can stick around. If you don't have time, then no worries. But we just go into a working session. So I'm working on one of my books and everybody else is working on something to do with their books. And we stay here for the full 2 hours, either doing Q&A or working on our books together.
That's excellent. It's awesome. It's funny, there's that saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I've written a couple books before, but long time ago. And it hit me that I've been teaching for more than a decade. And after my last class, I got this like flash of, okay, it's time, put it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And what really resonated with me so then this showed up and it was like, okay, I'll take that message. And then what really resonated with me is from your workbook is this idea of the, let me go back to it so I don't misstate it, but the establishing a foundation or some sort of I think you called it a leadership path or structure.
Yeah, your thought leadership system.
Right, the system. And when I look back at my 10 years of teaching, there's a very clear system that I've used.
Mm-hmm.
So I got kind of excited because it looks very much aligned. So thank you for showing up.
So you're looking at writing a new book, I take it.
A new book, yes, a book that's based on I've been teaching a course that revolves around emotional intelligence, but it also brings in other disciplines. There's, physiology and there's psychology and and then it just comes together with really actionable tools and strategies because we don't have time to read all the books on all the shelves. So it brings together a lot of what the research says and gives people who are overextended, overwhelmed, high achievers, just quick actionable tools that actually work for getting out of overwhelm quickly or how to manage speaking under stress or all kinds of things.
Cool. Sounds like something I identify with some of those. I overextend myself, that's for sure. Whether or not I'm a high achiever, I'm not sure, but I definitely overextend myself and then I get overwhelmed.
It's human. And we live in a world. So that is part of the system is that how do we align our physiology with the modern world? Because we're operating on a system that was designed for millennia ago, but the modern world is at hyperspeed. So there's this this kind of disconnect. So how do we take advantage of the way we're designed? If we understand our physiology and understand our circuitry, we can use it to our advantage so that and then also to be aware of what's happening in my brain or in my body when I'm getting into overwhelm and being able to get out of that. So
So you were teaching at university, I take it?
UCLA, yeah, UCLA
UCLA.
Law School, yeah.
And in fact, I just had a young guy in my house the other day, and he's trying to get into UCLA Law School. He
Oh,
wants to go to school there. My grandfather
oh,
went to UCLA, although not law, but
mhm.
um,
Well, if this
so
person, I don't know that I can help it if if he wants to go to he wants to go to the law school.
mhm.
Um, well, I imagine he's, knows what he's had to do, but if he wants to reach out, I'm happy to talk to him.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll see if he's interested. His father's an attorney,
Mhm.
and so he's exploring it and debating what kind of law he wants to go into right now and such. So, yeah.
Yeah,
But he said UCLA is his first pick.
oh, good. Yeah. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're going to go to law school, it's probably one of the better ones. I don't mean just reputation wise. I mean, in terms of actual course of study and support, because law school is rigorous and unkind. So UCLA has a pretty good environment as that goes.
Cool. So what class were you teaching that fits within this book, or that would be the knowledge that goes in this book?
Yeah, so that is exactly the class I was teaching. It's got a hokey title, The Law in Your Life, and it's aligning your personal values with your practice of law. But it goes much way beyond that into all of those disciplines that we talked about: the emotional intelligence, stress management, resilience, joy. So,
I'm glad that they're teaching lawyers these things in school.
well, I wish it was part of the core curriculum. It's an elective. The class does get a good number of students, but I think that the legal educational system needs to start incorporating behavioral sciences, because it's based on the fallacy that law is purely analytical and a science, which it's not. But at the time that it was established, there was a belief that humans were rational. Now we know that not to be the case. So
Yeah.
we'll
Or at
see.
least one human's rationality doesn't match another's rationality.
1,000%.
Yeah. I kind of see this in a lot of other disciplines too. I went to business school, and
Mhm.
my business school, I got a degree in information systems management, which they plugged into the accounting school. And I thought, I hate accounting. I don't want to be an accountant. And why is this program under the accounting school? Well, if you understand the history of computers, then you understand why accountants would see computers as their thing that
Yeah.
they own. And yet by the time I was in school, I was thinking, this is a million miles away from accounting type stuff.
Yeah.
But I think out of that, I mean, a lot of business discipline springs from accounting. And of course, accounting is very numbers driven and analytical by nature. And so it seems like there are a lot of business people who are analytical by nature, but I'm a marketing guy. And so I come at from it from a different perspective, saying, no, there's so much psychology in the human element, and it's not just numbers and analysis. And so I'm glad to hear you say this.
Yeah, I think that there was a time when we like all disciplines have this kind of same erroneous foundation that, I think, therefore I am. I don't have it on my desk, but there's a really great book by a neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio called Descartes' Error. And he talks about this fallacy in our thinking. So.
All right, I'm looking up the book, because whenever somebody mentions a good book, then I have to get it. So, all right, I've got it up on Amazon for later.
Great.
All right. So what inspired you to come to the group at this time, and how can we help you, Judith?
Well, I just literally downloaded your workbook yesterday, or maybe it was Sunday night or yesterday. And then I got the follow-up email that said, we have a workshop, stop in. So I looked at my calendar, my afternoon was available. And I would like to make this process as sensible as possible. In other words, I don't want to spend a lot of time making mistakes others before me have made in trying to write the kind of book I'm trying to write.
Got it.
So
Yeah,
if
that's my
I
job.
can-
I make all the mistakes so you don't have to.
Exactly. There we go. Thank you. So the thought was, and I'm just curious. I'm a curious person and I like learning new things. So I thought, if there's information out there that can help make this make sense, then I want it.
Cool. Well, let's talk about the end. When do you want to have this book done?
I would like to have this book done. I'd love a rough draft in a month, but I'd say by the fall, I'd like to have a really readable book.
So you'd like it to be published, printed, available on Amazon by the fall, or you
Oh,
want to
no,
have the
no.
manuscript finished by the fall?
A manuscript finished, something I could hand to somebody and say, hey, take a look at this.
Got it.
See if it makes sense.
Have you looked into self-publishing versus traditional publishing? Is that something you've thought about?
Superficially, very superficially.
Okay. And who is the audience for the book?
Well, I call them
lawyers, is it?
high achievers. Pretty much everybody who is driven to thrive in this very fast and insane world that we work in.
Okay.
But I would narrow it to, if I had to, so high achievers, people in business, people in professionals, executives working under high intense pressures, high demand, high intensity environments. So anybody who works in a high intensity, high demand environment would benefit from this book.
Got it. I met a guy the other day. He's a tech guy, and he was telling me how he makes 6 figures, but he optimized his job so he only works 2 hours per week. And then he takes the rest of it off and takes a lot of naps. And I said, what would you do if you were doing something you were excited about? And he said, no, I'm not looking for that. So that would not be your audience, I would take it.
No, he figured it out. He's thriving in this world, in this environment. So he has figured it out. 90% of the people I would say 100% of the people I talk to are crushed under the demands. They are burning out. They have young families. And they're trying to juggle. I think Jean just mentioned losing 2 hours a day, right? So how do you optimize your day? How do you optimize your internal experience? How do you optimize your effort so that your effort is effective? So you don't need 8 hours a day. That's a factory model from the 1900s. So we don't necessarily need 8 hours a day to do our best work. So how do we optimize all of that and thrive in this environment? And most people haven't figured it out. They're still following the factory model.
Yeah, we're stuck with that, it seems. So do you have a working title for your book?
I do. It's called From Angst to Zen. And it's kind of a science-backed roadmap to going from overwhelm into more peaceful inner peace and thriving in this crazy world. So
that's good. That's clever. In fact, I'm kind of surprised if it's not taken already. That's great.
Oh gosh, I didn't even think about that.
I'm going to look it up real quick.
Okay.
Hey, Judith, is the Zen aspect of the book derived any from Buddhism or Asian studies? Is any of that, does it come from that?
Yes and no, because you can't use the word Zen without it actually coming from that. But what's happened to the word Zen is that it has been kind of co-opted and integrated into just English language as meaning relaxed, inner peace. Oh, I feel so Zen right now. But the book does definitely meditation is a part of it, because I don't think we can optimize our experience in the world without having some sort of contemplative practice or meditation practice. But it's Zen with a lowercase z, not Zen, the practice. And I've been struggling a little bit with how to deal with that. But using it more in our colloquial sense of Zen in the way we use it now, when people talk about, oh, the atmosphere was so Zen, or I'm feeling Zen, or that person was really Zen. And so we've kind of, what's the word I want to say? We've not kidnapped it. There's that word?
Appropriated.
Appropriated it.
Hijacked.
But it is used in the English language as, in this colloquial sense.
And I'm curious, as far as reaching maybe a higher state of whatever you're trying to deliver to your readers, you mentioned emotional intelligence. Is that you want to help people is it similar to having a higher level of emotional intelligence where you don't get frustrated and you don't have anxiety? Is that part of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. When we become more aware of our internal experience and we learn how to manage that internal experience, then we are able to engage with the external experiences, challenges, and surprises that come into our life in a much more even-keeled way.
Okay. Do you describe it differently, or do you just have all your readers aspire to get to a higher level of emotional intelligence, or do you have your own?
Oh, no, I describe it differently. I mean, I use obviously some of the language from the disciplines, but
because emotional intelligence, immediately people recognize that word because there's a book called Emotional Intelligence, or tons of books called Emotional Intelligence. So how does your book differentiate? And I'm just curious because you used the word, and I was thinking how that relates to.
Because it's one aspect of the book. So emotional intelligence is just one aspect of the many intelligences that humans have. So we have intellectual intelligence, we have emotional intelligence, we have social intelligence, we have kinesthetic intelligence, somatic intelligence, we have cognitive intelligence, we have natural intelligence, how we perceive our natural world. So emotional intelligence is just one of a number of intelligences. That
do you plan to use those in your book? All of the intelligences, or
I touch on all aspects, yes, because we are integrated beings. So we're physiological beings, we are cognitive beings, we are emotional beings, we're social. That's why we're in a group. We help each other. We connect.
If included in those intelligence, if cultural intelligence is also included, that's where you might have some overlap with what I'm writing about.
Overlap with what? Sorry, I didn't hear.
With the areas that I'm interested in. Like I specifically talk about, sometimes I use emotional intelligence and self-awareness and cultural awareness for doing business across cultures, specifically between Americans and Chinese people. So there's a lot of cultural awareness, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, being aware of things you don't know because you're entering a completely different set of values. How do you control your anxiety and frustration when people don't behave the way you expect? I'm sure there's a lot of common areas.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, don't want to get distracted, but just curious.
You appreciate the cultural aspect. Absolutely.
So Judith, where are you at in the book process, and how can we help?
I'm very, very much at the beginning, and what I decided to do was just as a means of organizing years of information is just go through my lectures one at a time, pull information that I want to see appear in the book, dump it into my pretend manuscript, and then I'll clean it up and organize it afterward. But at least I know that all the concepts I'm looking at including will be in this pot called a book.
Well, that's the great thing, is that you've been teaching this for years, and so you really have the book mostly written probably at this point, because you've already been working on it for years, developing this content, right?
The content is there, but to make it flow in a book that people want to read, I think that's where the challenge for me will be. Not insurmountable, not unwelcome, definitely welcome. But unfortunately, it won't be as simple as copying and pasting from my lectures, which would be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Although that's a good place to start, though, is doing the copying and pasting.
Yeah.
And then a good editor, of course, can help a lot with smoothing out some of that flow and such. But
Yeah.
but you've been through this before, right? So how many books did you write before?
Well, I wrote a novel back in the
Mhm.
day when I wanted to be a novelist. And I wrote what I would call a precursor to this book, which is a book I wrote before I started teaching that just came out of my experience. But as just someone writing from their experience, the world isn't. And it really wasn't for like popular consumption. It was
Mhm.
more for my limited world consumption. People asked me to write a book, so I did. So this is a much more advanced and I think, foundationally rich version.
Mhm. So what are some questions you have about the book process, or are you still figuring out what the questions are that you want to ask?
I'm still figuring it out. I'm here to hear everybody else's questions and to learn from everybody else, but I appreciate the engagement here, and it's already been interesting and helpful.
Great. By the way, where do you live? What city are you in?
Now I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh, you're in Santa Fe. So are you retired from teaching?
No, I go back to teach.
Okay,
And
that's a bit of a commute.
yeah, I go back. I'm now I've shortened from the full semester down to the J term, which is a 2-week semester, and I go for the 2 weeks, and I kind of put it all on them and then leave. But the feedback, I think what encouraged me to pursue this is that I get continual feedback from students, and I coach, and from clients that this works, that they are benefiting.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
And that's fantastic. That's one of the great things about being a professor or a coach or somebody who has the opportunity to test their content out ahead of time. A lot of authors come up with an idea, put it in a book, and then it gets tested. But it's kind of too late at that point. It's great to be able to be a practitioner and test that content and get feedback and modify things, because then by the time it goes in the book, hey, this has already been tested with hundreds or thousands of people. You can feel pretty confident about the material.
Yeah, I think that's what motivated me, was that, oh my God, it's like, forgive me, but this shit works. So,
one book that was, I think there are probably a lot of books written by professors based on their lectures, right? But
sure.
One that jumps to mind is Clayton Christensen's book, How Will You Measure Your Life? Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, I may have the book, but I've listened to his lectures and seen his work online. Yeah, he's a wonderful, wonderful human.
He is. And that book was based on his ending lecture that he would give at the end of his MBA courses. As the students were about to graduate, he would give this lecture that he became famous for, and then he turned it into that book. And I think that book's just a treasure of knowledge and advice. And as you were talking, it kind of reminded me of that.
I actually am making a note to go back to it and look at it again. It's so inspiring. And that's what this is intended to do. This is the purpose, my goal at the beginning of every class, at the beginning of every coaching engagement at the beginning, and for this book is really to equip and empower people with their own, make them aware of the own power and ability that they have to take charge of their lives and live their best lives. And I believe every human on this planet has the capacity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Great. Love it.
That's the goal.
That could actually be your hero book. If you're going through Josh's workbook, that Clayton Christensen book could be a good hero book. How do you measure your life?
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
All right. Well, Virginia, let's move on to you. Where are you at in your process?
Well, I'm still working on the parking lot, and I have, it was interesting, as a Judith, I was invisible there for a while, so I heard you, but I didn't have my picture here. And now I was, I remember for the previous book that I didn't publish, I did like a dumping sheet for that of all these different ideas. And so I think I'm ready now to take the 2 different parking lot lists. And then something has been telling me to go back, just like what Judith has been talking about, into some of my own notes of the process that I went through to do what I want to be teaching these very wealthy women, and to write down the key points, the places where I had to, that enabled me to shift gears, that enabled me to come back to being the person that I always was before I crashed. And so what I'm kind of wondering now is how I put it all together.
And so you've got a lot of this in your parking lot document. When you say put it all together, tell me more about that.
Okay. Begin to get the structure for the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think I know it, but as I'm putting, when I worked on the first dumping page, they said that the stuff that was, and I did it with Brian Tracy just because we're all sharing stuff here. And then they said that you had 50 things on the dumping page, and those were your chapters. And I don't feel like I'm doing the same thing with this parking lot thing. In other words, I feel like now that I've shifted over writing from violence and trying to put more empathy in the world and less violence, into working with very extremely wealthy women who are trying to get in touch with themselves after either trauma or empty nesters, that kind of stuff, through neuroscience experiences. So that takes into account all of my own personal. I've been working with electronic stimulation since 1980, personally, with I prevented a spinal fusion for myself, and a lot of different things. And then I got to this brainwave entrainment business, which is unbelievable, the way it makes new pathways in the brain. So as I was going into that healing experience, I began to say, oh, that's where I kind of checked out of that. Like, and there were simple things like I had to go into full self-protection mode, kind of, and I wasn't maybe as, I used to be generous to a fault. And so I had to learn to tone it down, and then maybe you go from one extreme to the other. So I got a little bit too maybe selfish. So I began to think in these different lessons and things. Oh, that's a way back. And now in moderation, now that I have this sort of moderation place. And so now I think that there's real value in that, because I think that's what I'm going to be teaching a lot of these really wealthy women. The business with the neuroscience brainwave entrainment, the business of finding yourself again after you've lost it, either for your children or an extremely successful house. I'm 75, so it's a different generation. And then you have your own issues where you're in that world of success, which a lot of it, I love, by the way, your posts recently. A lot of it is, I call it affluenza. It's like fluff. And the real core is getting down to who you really are and having the energy at over 50 to go forward and to, as you were saying, Judith, I love what you said too. We all have, I was also I've been in education communications and a writer and a presenter and a thought leader. And an author. I have to copy in this, and I published a short story, so that actually counts as an anthology with 10 best-selling authors. So that counts as being an author. And so what I guess what's happening is it's like the kaleidoscope. It's getting more and more specific. And I don't want to waste too much time putting stuff in the parking lot without incorporating. And you could do that all day. I have done that. Not going to do it anymore.
But you're looking for some structure at this point.
Yeah, I'm looking for structure, and I'm looking for like the kaleidoscope, how you refine it and make it clearer.
Mm-hmm. So you've got a lot of information in the parking lot, but no natural structure has manifested itself yet. And so you're looking for, now, how do I organize all this into something that makes sense? Is that right?
You got it.
Okay. Well, let's talk about a few different ways that people organize their books. You've got chronological. You start at the beginning, you go to the end. Doesn't seem like that fits your book. It's not that type of book, right?
Right.
You've got anthologies where it's divided by different people who are contributing to the book. Doesn't necessarily sound like that type of book either. You've got books that are divided by topic. You have a number of topics that are all tied together and related. And that's a pretty loose way of talking about it. That can just describe a lot of other book structures. With a lot of, if you've got a how-to book where it's how to do something, how to achieve something, how to become something, how to get a certain result. If you have a how-to book, then you're going to have a system or a formula or a set of steps, a path, something that you lead people through. So Stephen Covey had his 7 habits of highly effective people, 7 habits. And then there's your outline. You've got 7 chapters, and each one of them is one of the habits. But is your book a how-to that way, or do you feel like that doesn't really fit?
It's closer to what I want, but I think mine might teaching memoir to have anything in that category. In other words, there might be some kind of like that Dare. Remember we talked last week about that Dare to Be You by Liz Bruno. And some of that format, I think, is probably because I'm trying to pull out the authentic self, and I'm trying to come from my genius. I mean, I'm 75 years old. We didn't used to call ourselves geniuses, but in other words, I just wrote a letter to a hospital. That's why I'm sorry that I'm late. They asked me on an evaluation, and I had some young physicians that they were women too. I usually know this when the men. That's the difference between the men and the boys. There's one with the girls and the women, and so at any rate, to come back to this, there are just things that are the best with, it's the best way of telling them to have some story with it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of each chapter, have some lessons. It's more interesting. I don't know. I'm kind of asking here. And that's part of, and I'm very, very glad that we can just kind of come here and speak the truth, because you can't play that game of and just keep doing research forever, you know?
Right. So if you're doing memoir,
Teaching memoir.
Right. It doesn't have to be chronological, although typically memoir, anything to do with memoir is going to be chronological, because there's going to be some story that goes from chapter to chapter. But it doesn't have to be. Each chapter can be an experience in and of itself, and it doesn't necessarily need, the chapters don't necessarily need to be in chronological order. They can be in some other logical order, whether it's that it's ideas that are building on other ideas or something of that nature. I'm looking up, it's a book that my wife was telling me about that I'm just looking up to see if it's potentially a format. It's a book called The House on Mango Street. Have you ever heard of this?
I haven't. The House on Mango Street. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a memoir. It's a coming of age memoir. And I don't know if it fits at all what you're looking for. It just, some of the things that you were saying was making me think of this.
And who's it by, Josh?
It's by Sandra Cisneros.
Cisneros. Okay, Sandra.
Yep.
Okay, I'll look at that.
Again, it might not be at all what you're looking for in terms of a hero book or a structure to follow, but I know that it's individual stories divided by chapter, and each story is kind of self-contained. And I'm not sure if they all fit together in the end and tell a story together, or if it's just individual vignettes, and each one has kind of a lesson or something that goes along with it. So, so do you feel like your book is a collection of lessons then? Because you mentioned having a lesson at the end of each chapter.
It's part of the old teacher in me. You have to summarize the main point. I think that I want to show also my progress. I want not just to be sure people have understood, but that I think I should sequentially organize the material as people grow. And just like anything sequential, you have to do step 1 to get to step 2. In other words, there's a reason that by doing each of the step in an order, you grow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that might be some of it. And again, I guess just as Judith was saying too, and I have all these journals, and I think that might be the place to go back to next, because that might also even give me the sequences in which I went through these, as I wrote the morning notes. And then I can also find some of the lessons that I did that were good. Does that sound like a productive place to go?
Yeah. Well, tell me, what ties all of this together, this book? I mean, if you had to sum up in one sentence, you can't go on for 2 minutes and tell me, it has to be 10 seconds. If you were telling somebody what they're going to get from this book, what they're getting out of this book, what the value is, the lesson, the big lesson, the one lesson, or how it's going to change them, what is it that you want people to get out of the book?
Okay, I have that written down here succinctly. So I guess without getting to the page, I have it all written down, is to be these neuroscience-based processes help you eliminate self-limiting beliefs and connect with your natural self and enable you to have a successful and happy life.
Okay. So you want to help people overcome their limiting beliefs so that they can be happy and successful, whatever that looks like for them.
Well, and also whatever it looks like for them, but also basically because, and I'm sure maybe men do this too, to a different degree. I mean, they give up things for their families too.
Mhm.
And I won't make any editorial comments on that. I'm learning to zip it. At any rate.
Well, we hope they make sacrifices.
Yeah, oh, no, I do, and I do know that. And also sometimes in your age too, you see more and more the sacrifices. In hindsight's 20/20, as they say,
Mhm.
but this is really that they connect with their, and maybe have a chance to do or be all the things that they dreamed of while they were raising a family, or all right, here it is here. Extremely wealthy women over 50 who are divorced, widowed, or empty nesters and want to reconnect with their authentic selves by overcoming self-limiting beliefs through neuroscience-based processes that create new pathways in the brain. These processes produce positive thoughts and life results. These processes help me realize that you can have the world and not know it. I was then able to replace affluenza, that's what I call having the world and not knowing it, with inner peace when my heart and feet hit the ground with gratitude. That's it right there.
All right. That's a mouthful, but that sounds like a good back cover of a book right there.
Thank
So, and remind me again, your audience is it women just like you, would you say? Or
It's women over 50 that that have 7, 8, or 9 figures, because no, and we got back to the genius. I sort of, got off that with your area of genius. But we decided that mine is, I know that world. And I was forced to lose it all and come back, in a sense. And I had to go, and it was this neuroscience and brainwave entrainment that helped me. I couldn't have done it I couldn't have gotten this far without it.
Okay. And the memoir aspect of your book, why do you want to have the memoir part or your own story in the book? Why do you feel like that's helpful?
The only thing I was thinking about is it might be a vehicle for my telling the story,
Mhm.
and it might, sort of one of the grounding principles of education is that when you see someone survive something, it speaks for itself. I mean, children, I bumped into, I haven't been around very small children in a long time, and I bumped into a couple this weekend that were misbehaving with their grandmothers in the ladies' room. And she was hitting them, and I just used a more educational approach. And the way the kids responded to me, because I was doing that. And one of them, I just said, it's a gift to be able to relate to them that way, that I'm not going to beat them up. I'm not going to hit them. And I'm letting them know, A, what they went wrong, and B, what's expected of them, and reasoning with them, And this little boy just gave me a hug. He said, "Are you a babysitter?" I said, "No, I was a teacher." And then I realized later, I didn't even think about it, that he hugged me because I was going to protect him from this crazy grandmother who was hitting his brother. That part didn't register, but the whole joy of the children and the naturalness and all of that stuff. And so I think there's a part of that in telling part of your own story, through what I've been through, that I actually went through this stuff. I'm not, it's not a fairy tale.
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe
Great.
there isn't.
Great. Jen, or Judith, sorry, you had a comment about Jen Sincero.
Yeah, I mentioned Jen Sincero. Jen Sincero wrote the Badass books.
Mhm.
You Are a Badass, but they're very, she writes through her story.
Mhm.
I haven't read them, but I hear they're great.
Yeah, I've read one of them, and yeah, it's good. She's a fantastic writer.
She's a great writer. I have the books. I've flipped through them. I haven't. But her story runs through them. So because she uses herself as a kind of a "you can do this too" example. So it sounds like that would be helpful. And I think the other thing she does is she brings in some other people's stories too. So
Oh, I know, and you have to do that too, otherwise it's boring. You have to, bring in,
absolutely. I agree that stories are very helpful. And that's how we learn. It's one of the ways we learn. We learn through story. So that's how we remember.
Yeah. And I think personal stories, I think your story is essential and great, Virginia. The reason I ask the question is a lot of times when people say they want to include memoir in their book, what they're really looking for is their own form of therapy. And it's important to keep a focus on the audience and say, how does this serve the audience for me to share my story, versus I'm putting this in there because it does something for me emotionally to put this in the book. There's nothing wrong with writing a book for oneself, for one's own reasons. And sometimes those books can end up serving people really well too. In fact, speaking of Zen, Judith, have you read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance?
I actually own the book, but I have not read it.
So that book, there's an interesting story behind that book. The guy who wrote it, he was a professor. He was institutionalized. He was in an insane asylum. He legitimately went insane. And as part of his therapy coming out of it, the doctor said, you should write your book. Like, that would be good for you. It would be healthy for you to write your story. And so he wrote this book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which then became this massive bestseller. And I read it in high school and it changed my life. Well, he didn't write it for me. He wrote it for himself. He wrote it as a form of therapy. And yet that book has turned out to be extremely helpful for a lot of people. And so But I think it's more productive generally for us to go into writing a book, if it's got memoir and personal stories, asking ourselves that question: how does this serve my audience? How is this helpful to my audience? And maybe sometimes it's hard to answer that question, but we just have a gut feeling that I need to include this. This is important for some reason. But I think it's good to question ourselves and say, is this for me or is this for the audience?
Well, no, I absolutely appreciate all of that. And then what I was doing without reading it is I was going into the teacher part of my brain, which is what you do, is how do these illustrations, how do these pictures, how do these exercises get the kid to understand my point rather than me telling them. So, but I didn't realize I was just like doing that in my head.
Right.
When you write curriculum, that's what you do.
Right. Well, and the great thing about story is you're really showing with the story rather than telling. Everybody gets bored when somebody's told what to do or how to do something. But when we tell a story and we show somebody how to do it, then it engages the brain.
Now, what about that's a lot about the questions at the end of the chapter. It's that you don't want those to be like teaching things. You want them to be like maybe things to think about, or I was thinking they could be like lessons that the person did for themselves, that they just answered some questions for themselves and then they got their own information that applied to the general information I was talking about.
If I can, I'm 1,000% in agreement with you on that, because when in my class, the students and my clients get assignment, they have to respond to a prompt. So say we talk about an experience like anxiety and how to overcome it, and here's a tool, but then they have to actually use it, and then they have to send me a response to a prompt, questions that I've sent to them, and they have to respond. And it's not for me, it's for them, through that they learn the process, and and sometimes they go, this didn't work for me, which is totally fine. But then they know that doesn't work for them and to try something else. So I think this idea, obviously going back to what we all know, which is we learn through story, but also through experience, and also through fun and play. So any ability to incorporate those things, I think, is helpful.
To me, those have always been the best teachers that could, that could do it that way. And also, like when you look at the kids, you have a sense of what they particularly need. You get it's like a grain of corn. Like if I tell you this story, you're going to get it, and as opposed to somebody else is going to be different.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
And I think I've come to learn that's a gift. I thought everybody had it, but everybody doesn't have it, And no, this is all very, very helpful to me as I start to put it. And I think, and it gets you much more excited too, because I think that going through these, they're the morning notes from Jean Cameron that I have of me during all this time, that will help me be the next step of what goes into the refining of the parking lot. And then a lot of this, I've got to figure this out too. I've already spoken to the person that invented the brainwave entrainment and all that other stuff, the neuroscience, because I would have to buy the ability to have people use it or that kind of stuff, which thank God it's gone down much from when I started it. We started using it a long time ago. So in other words, I would have to incorporate somebody else's work in this too, and but it is it's really miraculous how it can help with depression, how it can give you energy, how it can give you motivation. And they even have the latest one they're working on now is about procrastination. And it's unbelievable. So at any rate, that's I guess the next place that, and I got this, like when I meditate, came to me. Now look through your journals, look through your,
Good to follow those promptings when you get them.
No, but I mean, so that's why I'm very glad to have a place here to bounce this, all of this, just boom, throw up on the table and say, this is where I am, this is what I have, where do I go, And so thank you.
I know someone who needs your book.
I'm sorry?
I know someone who needs your book.
Good. And I know, and I think there are a lot, and I think there are, I don't think I know, I used to hang out with a lot of these women, and they didn't have to It's actually funny when a lot of them bump into me now and I look pretty good. They have no idea the work it went to get back here. But like I said, and then I'm really glad I have this place. I'm going to market to get to it easier. They have everything in the world and they don't know it and they're not happy. I'm talking like, multi-million-dollar houses in 4 continents or 3 continents rather, and jets and the whole 9 yards, and they're miserable. And there's something wrong with that, And the other piece that I didn't realize until the other day too how much I love children, until I was like with those little 3 in the bathroom. It really was a gift. And one little curly haired kid has the flashlight sneakers, when he moves, and how it's just the delight and the innocence and the joy of them. And it benefits the children, because if the mothers are happy, the children are going to be happier.
Yeah.
And I don't. I guess I'll end it with this. Someone told me once they were outside Bloomingdale's in Newton, Massachusetts. I come from the Boston area. And the woman got out of a Jaguar in 6-inch stilettos that she parked in the handicap parking lot because the stilettos were her candy, That's why Baskin Robbins has all those flavors, or used to have all those flavors, Okay, thank you. Oh, one last thing. I got something in a Facebook that was terrific. And I went to sign up. But I copied the posts and things, and I joined with and I can't find the name of the person or the person. Is there a way to do that?
Let's see. So you mean in the Facebook group for?
No, in a they had these 2 that I thought were really wonderful sayings here. You become what you feed your mind. And then they show about drama, bad news, negativity as opposed to positivity, discipline, that stuff. And then this other one that sometimes you have to stop worrying, wondering, and doubting. Have faith that things will work out, maybe not how you planned, but just how it's meant to be. I mean, I think they're delicious. So then I didn't get the name of, I cut them off to, post them somewhere, and I didn't get the name of the author, and I can't find the connection on Facebook. They contacted me to be a friend, and I went to their Facebook post to see who they were before I friended them. And then I copied these things and I lost them. So is there a way to find? Then I went back and I tried to look at the date that I did all this. Still can't find them. So is there a way to find out who it is?
I'm not sure. That's a good
Okay.
question. I mean, one thing you can do is you can take a photo of that with your phone, and then do you use Android or iPhone?
iPhone.
I don't know if iPhone has this feature, but you can do image search. I mean, you can do
really?
this, but you can do an image search. So you can take a photo of something and search for it, and it will give you search results wherever that image pops up. And so you should be able to find your way back to who created those in the first place. That might not be the person you got them from, but maybe it is.
I will go to the library tomorrow for the computer teaching place, and someone there might know how to do image search on your phone.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, because I especially this, I mean, this just puts what you feed your mind. I mean, it's part of this concept is in all of our books, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you very much. This has been very helpful, and nice meeting you, Judith.
Likewise. Absolutely. Wonderful to meet you.
All right. Well, we're hitting the top of the hour, so we're going to go into our workshop part. Judith, if you want to hang out and work on your book stuff, great. If you need to go, that's totally fine too.
Thank you. I actually did schedule an hour of writing, so I'll just go off camera. And
we just go on mute. And if anything comes up during the next hour and you're like, oh, wait, I got this question, just unmute yourself and start talking. I leave my camera on. You'll see I'm right here. I'm just working on stuff. So if you unmute, you can talk and we can chat more.
And I leave my camera on too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And sometimes we have people who jump into the meeting a half hour later into the workshop and they're like, hey, just wanted to jump in. I got a question or something. So we'll see. We might have it all to ourselves, and it might be quiet and peaceful, or somebody might jump in and start asking questions.
Sounds good.
All right. I'll go on mute.
Thank you. Lots of food for thought here. I appreciate all of your input and feedback.
Great. You're welcome. Glad to have you here.
See you soon.
We'll go on mute, but I'll still be here.